We will kick off this program with a power panel discussion on going walletless and the future of consumerism. Joining this panel is a lineup of forward-thinking senior industry leaders who are in the area of consumer service and digitization. Our first guest is dialing in from Singapore. Bryan is a partner at Pinsent Masons. He practices in areas such as data protection, finance, technology, media, and is ranked top tier in several categories by Legal 500 and Chambers. Bryan is also a member of the Advertising Standards Authority of Singapore, Consumer Association, and the Consumer Association of Singapore. Our second guest is passionate in technology, innovation, and digital initiatives. Matthew Tan has over 20 years of experience in technology management, and he is currently the Group Chief Information Officer of Domino's Pizza for Malaysia, Singapore, and Cambodia. Our third guest is signing in from Australia. As the head of transport for New South Wales Digital Payments Business Unit, Kurt Brissett is responsible for delivering innovative digital and payment products across a variety of channels to over 4 million regular customers. And that takes over 670 million trips annually, equating to over 1.5 billion in annual revenue. Kurt is responsible for the Opal network, which is geographically the world's largest electronic ticketing system. And he has successfully delivered Australia's largest contactless payment system, with approximately 25,000 contactless payment terminals deployed across the Opal network. Lastly, but not least, the panel moderator, MC Lai, who is currently leading the Kantar Insights division in Malaysia. With more than 26 years of experience in consumer understanding and insights in the insights domain, he has worked with clients across many markets, leading various regional accounts previously. Okay, everyone, remember, if you do have any questions for the panel, please do send them over and they will address it during the session. All right, guys, so the panel is getting ready, and so should you. So stay tuned, and we will be back shortly. Bye, guys.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session. I hope everybody is, having a good morning so far. So I think I'm really excited to be speaking to a panel of a very international sort of experienced person. So I think you guys have all had the intro. So this morning we're going to have Kurt, we have Bryan, and we have Matthew on the panel. So I think I'm going to just kickstart given the time that we have. So as we know, the topic is all around digital payment and e-wallet. So, let me start off with insights that we have found out recently. So Kantar, as all of you know, we are a consumer understanding and insight business. So we did a survey recently to find out Malaysia and Malaysians' readiness in terms of looking at digital payment and e-wallets. So the good thing is 2 out of 3 Malaysians are actually showing a very high preference of using digital payment over cash. So I think I want to sort of kickstart the conversation with the panel to get your point of view on, is this something that you see as a very positive trend of starting, or are we still, got a way to go in terms of adopting digital wallet or e-payment as, compared to the rest of the country around our region and around the world? So it would be interesting to hear from each of you. And also, I guess, given that we are all, in a COVID sort of situation, how much the impact of COVID has played in either expediting or preventing the trend in terms of e-wallets. So let's open the floor to Kurt, Bryan, and Matthew and get your point of view on this.
Sure thing. Maybe I'll kick off, MC, and thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. In Sydney and New South Wales, from a transport perspective, we've really seen an increased adoption of digital payment from our citizens, particularly as a result of COVID. We've seen an increased uptake of contactless payments in general, but we've also seen customers preferring the convenience of using digital wallet payments across our transport network in at Transport for New South Wales, we've enabled our Opal network, which is essentially our public transport network that customers use to access bus, train, tram, and ferry services. We've made it contactless enabled, so customers can use their credit, debit card, or link device to pay for those particular services. We've seen approximately 30% of all of our trips that are undertaken across the Opal network now being done using contactless methods of payments. And we've also seen an increase in the adoption of digital wallet payments also. We're now seeing of all contactless payments in the order of 35 to 40% of those now are undertaken by customers that are preferring to use a digital wallet. So it's certainly, I think COVID has I guess, sped up this behavioural change that we've seen, and customers are certainly gravitating towards it.
Great. I mean, I think from a transportation sort of industry, that's something that's very close to the heart of many consumers, right? Because we do transportation every day. So I guess, Kurt, you mentioned about 30% or so adoption in the context. Is that something that you guys are relatively happy with where we are, or do you think that ideally it should be on a higher sort of level as well?
Yeah, I think that in New South Wales we've enabled contactless payments for adult customers, so they're able to receive the same fare as what a customer would if they were using our Opal Transit card. So in that particular customer segment, we've seen a really good adoption of contactless payments because effectively it's a lot more convenient. Customers can effectively bring their own ticket and not necessarily have to top up a prepaid card. So there's no queuing at ticketing machines. There's it's a pay-as-you-go type scenario. It's really lent itself towards our visitors and infrequent travellers who may not necessarily want to use a stored value transit card. But we would encourage more of our customers to use it because we think that it's a good customer experience for them. And we've been certainly partnering with a number of the banks and financial institutions that we've worked with to bring this capability to bear, to try and attract and incentivise this type of offering also through incentives and the likes.
Yep. Okay. Very interesting there. So I guess moving from a transportation to more of a consumer sort of industry on a day-to-day. So turning on to Matthew. So from a consumer perspective, especially in a food and F&B sort of thing, which is something that we need every day. How are you seeing the adoption of digital payment and e-wallet within that industry?
Well, digital payment and e-wallet have basically taken an evolution. I think Malaysia specifically, we have seen a growing trend of using digital payment in general. Coming to the pandemic, I think we have seen an increased rate of online purchases via digital payment method. And I would say in a way it's probably also influenced by the higher hygiene awareness on the use of cash, whereby cash is passed around, right? So that there is a consumer behavior, or rather consumer fear of the pandemic, which further encourages this use of digital payment methods, right? So that can be from a sense of e-wallet, like I think mentioned, whereby we are very encouraged by the promotions and the incentives, but at the same time also the convenience and the fear of this pandemic. So that driven by the increased e-commerce kind of transactions, plus the need to be careful. I think that we have seen a great increase in the number of consumers adopting digital payments.
And from a I guess infrastructure perspective, do you guys have to therefore do something quite differently and quite quickly in order to cater to this sort of changing in consumer behavior?
Well, I think it's important to constantly adopt a high resiliency from a systems infrastructure perspective, whereby the user experience is seamless. But at the same time, I think with the increase of transactions, there's always a stress on the infrastructure available. No one expected the pandemic to hit us so quickly and the impact to be so fast. So naturally, we need to pivot with a higher scalability in terms of the systems and seamless process in terms of the user journey. So that's really important.
Right. Okay. So I guess we've heard from various different sort of industry, from transport to consumer. So it's also good to get another point of view where it's coming from Bryan, who is sort of looking from a regulatory point of view, I guess, as well as from a part of what the Association of Creative and Advertising Agencies and stuff like that. So from that angle, what do you see are some of the things that either regulatory or sort of association have helped in order for this adoption of e-wallet and digital payment?
Well, so I think for us, it's been quite a natural progression in a sense where Singapore was trying to encourage the use of digital payments. Admittedly, it was a bit slow, and the pandemic, like we've heard before, proved to be the catalyst for a massive explosion. So some of the sites were telling us, or the providers were telling us, that volumes have increased by at least 100%, doubled, and obviously more people are on it. I think from a pandemic point of view, as Matthew said, that made a lot of sense because not passing around the money was also very helpful. You have one less thing to worry about in terms of how viruses can spread. I think we learned a little bit of that from the SARS episode also. But from a regulatory point of view, so Singapore also put in place a licensing requirement, and it had to phase this in. It actually did this pre-pandemic. So the deadline for filing applications was actually end February 2020, just before the pandemic officially hit us. And so all the parties who were providing payment services started putting in their applications. And I think we had almost close to 400 entities. Now, there were different mix of people, some remittance guys, some cross-border, some electronic payments, some digital tokens, stuff like that. But that's a huge number of licensees in the Singapore context to start making applications. So there's quite a lot of different providers now. It's been a year since all of these providers are still operating under temporary exemption. And that's because the regulator is still processing that. The regulator is quite careful in giving out these licenses. And I think that's for good reason, because an important factor in encouraging the use of digital payments is the trust factor. You do not want to have a breach of consumer trust where monies go missing, or there's some kind of cybersecurity attack and the provider is not ready to handle that. And so in order to do that, there needs to be careful assessment of processes. There needs to be careful assessment of AML, their technology risk management processes. And so that is what is going to take some time before all those licenses get fully fleshed out. And so from a regulator's point of view, making sure that that trust is preserved, that the trust that that will see the risk of the provider suffering some kind of hit, that is preserved. So the regulator will be very quick. So in the case of Wirecard, which is quite well publicized, the regulator moved in quite quickly once things started unraveling. Second, I think in terms of anti-money laundering. So one key worry about such systems, it's easy to transfer the money, but similarly, if you don't take care, criminals will get their hands on the system and they will use it for their own purposes. And so the anti-money laundering process is also quite tight. And I think all these go together towards engendering consumer trust. And so from a consumer protection point of view, it's very important. And so the regulator is really looking out for these things. The regulator also wants to ensure that the entities are licensed, that the advertisements are also properly done. There's no misrepresentation. There's no hidden fees. So it's quite a number of things. The regulators, as I said, different regulators are also getting to grips with these obligations. Again, that's why it's taking a bit of time to get through that. But
Right.
I think it's all moving in the correct direction.
Right. I mean, as a consumer or even as a brand owner, I think it's quite assuring to know that the regulation and all that are also evolving in that context. So I guess a question to all the panel here is, there are different countries at different levels in terms of the adoption as well as how they have adopted the e-payment. In your mind, if you were to think of one country that is considered as a role model in terms of how they have rolled out, promoted, and encouraged digital payment adoption and infrastructure, which country comes to mind, and what are the success factors for that country to be considered as a role model?
If I can jump in again, I think ironically, the countries in which digital payments have taken off the fastest and probably the most innovative are countries where the existing payment infrastructure was lacking. And so that saw the need for technology-driven innovation to arrive into the market. So I think the prime example of which would be China, which, vast system, difficult to handle cash. Electronic payments really took off quickly, and I believe that the Chinese are now known for some of the innovation surrounding payments, where digital payments are so ubiquitous that people prefer digital payments, electronic payments, to handling cash. And that's fairly remarkable. What that also tells us is that the opportunities in the region would lie with the countries in which the payment infrastructure is the most lacking. And we have seen that in some of the countries where there's a large number of unbanked, for instance. So the digital banks do take that place, and they now make it much simpler to access banking facilities. So for instance, if it used to take you a 2-hour walk to the nearest bank branch of whichever bank you had no choice over, now the nearest digital bank branch might only be 5 minutes, because that's really your existing mom and pop convenience store that has been in place all that time, with a little small terminal to just handle some basic banking transactions. And so ironically, that's where we're seeing it's not the most advanced countries have the most resistance to electronic payments, because everybody's so happy with what we currently have. But where that has been lacking, that's where the innovation has taken place the most.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having been in China, it's amazing how even if you buy roadside store site, and 60 years old auntie would have digital payment ready, and if you give her cash, you frown on you like, what are you doing? So yeah, I think that's really good. What about Kurt and Matthew? I mean, is there a country that sort of stood out for you, and why?
Well, my view is I think many developed countries across APAC region, specifically China, India, Australia, or even Malaysia, I think we've seen a very high adoption, largely, I would say, driven by the ease of access of the internet. So having the internet helps a lot, especially in the rural areas, whereby people can now pay via their smartphones and things like that. So we have also seen a lot of marketing push from the providers with some of the incentives program, and there's also a change in social behavior whereby people are adopting these payments better. Well, I think Bryan put it very well to say that the level of convenience that the consumer gets is very different at this region. So when you talk about the more rural areas in China or India or even Malaysia, I think accessibility has been a challenge before this digital payment came into picture. So with this, there's increased convenience, right? It's like jumping from cassette to MP3 and skipping the entire CD altogether. So that really gave that great amount of convenience that they experience. So that has pushed the adoption at an exponential rate. So that's really crazy to see where that will take us in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's an exciting time ahead. Kurt, what about you? Do you have any sort of country that you would sort of benchmark?
Listen, I think several of the Southeast Asian countries are well advanced in that space. I mean, within Australia, I think we've got a really high proportion of adults that have smartphones, and I think that's obviously a key enabler. And with the native sort of digital wallet functionality now that's been increasingly built into each of the respective operating systems, the ease of which to be able to use digital wallet payments is ever improving. And so in Australia, we've got, I think it's about 96-97% of all adults have a smartphone. And we've got a really high percentage or proportion of customers that use contactless payments. So we're sort of starting to see this sort of gravitation towards digital wallet payments, but we've still got a high percentage of customers that are using plastic credit cards. But I think COVID and the likes have really started to sort of nudge customers towards that medium. I think that a barrier to a lot of people sort of using digital wallet payments is familiarity with technology, demographics. Obviously, we've got customers, particularly in the public sector, we've got to cater for all customer segments. So we've got to be able to provide that degree of accessibility, and we do have customers that are unbanked and the like. So you are always going to have, I guess, those customers that you need to be able to cater for and be able to provide other methods of payment for them to be able to access your services. But I think, really what we've seen definitely in New South Wales and Sydney particularly is with COVID, particularly at the state government level, there's been a really good program enacted in order to provide financial subsidies to our citizens, and a lot of those subsidies have needed to be applied for, or it's become easier for customers to apply for those using digital channels, and in order to access those subsidies, it's generally via a digital payment channel also. So I think what we've seen is a lot of those customers that were previously either somewhat reticent or hadn't necessarily adopted digital payments, this has been a real catalyst to enact that type of behaviour change. So that's really sort of what we've seen.
Right. I think you mentioned a good point about focusing on some of the segments which are still I guess behind or needed help in terms of adoption. So I guess again, question to everyone is, if you look across the various different profiles of customers or consumers, which are those that you feel that really is still struggling or need a lot more help and push in order for the adoption of digital payment, and what either from a brand perspective or government perspective can be done in order to help to encourage these people to sort of come on the bandwagon, so to say?
Well, I don't think there's one single factor or one single area of population which are having challenges in this digital payment adoption. This is actually influenced by many factors such as privacy considerations, information security, ease of use, infrastructure accessibility, and so forth. So many people, even in the more developed areas of the country, may still refuse to use it due to behavioral issues, right? Mm-hmm. So in Klang Valley itself, we have seen a significant, I won't say significant, but probably still a small majority which are still resistant in using digital payments due to some of these considerations. And it's very driven by behavioral change and understanding. Of course, that is also has to be encouraged by how we engage them and how much they understand about these payment methods, right? These financial challenges remains very real in the real world, right? My parents have started adopting, whereby I have peers who are much younger than me refusing to use even internet banking. So that's really a very real problem. And as we develop with more infrastructure penetration, 5G and things like that, we're hopeful that this adoption will then increase on a organic basis, right? But I don't think there is a silver bullet to do that 100% conversion. That will take time.
Yeah, yeah. I think I do agree. I think there's no silver bullet, no magic bullet that will solve all the problems at one go. But I would also say that there is going to be substantial innovation. Kurt mentioned about using that to using the wallets that have been established to push down government subsidies. And when governments need to do something like that, especially in a kind of crisis situation, they've come up with some kind of plan. Singapore came up with some kind of a internal tourism voucher to give out, and e-wallets were the way to distribute it the fastest, right? Instead of mailing it out. I heard of another project. This was not during the pandemic, actually. This was the aftermath of, I think, a particularly devastating earthquake in Philippines. And the relief workers got there. Everything was wiped out, right? No infrastructure, electricity was down, water was down. But one of the easiest things they could set up was internet mobile base station, because that could run off generators and mobile signals could continue. And that meant phones were still in operation. And the relief workers thought to themselves, and one of them actually went on to found a digital payments company, you get all these aid coming in by cash. And if you were to create a queue and try to distribute cash, number one, cumbersome. Number two, all kinds of other problems would arise, right? In transporting the cash, safety, etc. But if you had those wallets ready and all you needed to do was send it out straight away to all the wallets, people can still start then accessing the aid already into their wallets because their phones were still up. Imagine what kind of change that could be. And again, that's the need, the necessity at that point in time driving that innovation. And I think, with digital, the ability to innovate goes up so many more notches than if you're dealing with physical cash. And so just let the techies do the innovation. They will get there, and slowly they will tackle that solution.
Yeah, listen, and I'd echo a lot of that. I mean, in New South Wales, we've done similar types of things where, in order to provide our citizens with financial subsidies in a rapid way, what we've done is we've adopted digital wallet QR code technology to basically push out vouchers for our citizens to be able to use them to purchase experiences and also purchase food and whatnot at restaurants and whatnot in order to stimulate economic activity in order to facilitate our recovery from COVID. So that's something that's been really well adopted and has been rapidly rolled out, and I think has been a catalyst for all that behaviour change. In terms of other, I guess, activities or strategies that we've adopted in order to nudge customers that may have challenges for a number of different reasons, being able to access technology and digital wallets and the likes. We've also got New South Wales New South Wales service centres that are effectively staffed by our people, and customers can or our citizens can effectively visit these in person. And one of the strategies that we adopt is to actually have our service centre staff step customers through how to actually use our digital channels and products and services in a far more convenient way, so that they can then go away and use it of their own accord. And that's been very effective, and that's worked well for, particularly our senior citizens who may not necessarily be across a lot of technology, but also customers who have accessibility challenges and have a carer and the likes. It also facilitates that type of interaction and enables our citizens to be far more self-sufficient as well. So that's worked well, and something that we sort of adopted in conjunction with a number of other strategies.
Right, that's good. I mean, it's again very encouraging to hear whether it's government, whether it's brands that are doing to promote this adoption of digital wallets. I guess you guys mentioned an interesting point about innovation. So I think innovation is one of the key that really would help to propel in terms of adoption. So I guess that there might be audience in this conference that is really trying to think about innovation, and we know innovation, firstly, for it to work, it needs to sort of address pain points or solve what is the biggest barrier for consumers. So if you could sort of help maybe some of the audience here, if there are one or two big pain points that you feel innovation should focus on in order to encourage greater adoption of digital payment or e-wallet, what area would that be? And so that I guess as an industry we can all focus in that space.
I would think ease of use is very important to most consumers. We have had many companies trying different strategies to put up a digital payment adoption, but most of it is not so much of the functionality or what it does. It's how difficult is it to use, or rather, how easy can it be, right? How many clicks does it take to complete a purchase, and how will the technologically challenged average Joe be able to use it as a method? So that becomes very key, right? I don't think we need anything too fancy, anything too pretty, but the ease of use is pivoting towards a more effective use of digital payments, right? Without that, it becomes very painful, right? The whole idea is, if I can just scan a QR to pay, so that's easy. But if I have to do 35 steps before that to link my credit card to my e-wallet, it really doesn't make sense. So when you get turned off at the initial starting point, that doesn't help very much.
Yeah. So Matthew, where we are now, where do you feel we are in terms of ease of use? Are we, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is like really, really bad, and 10 is where we want to be? Where do you think we are in terms of that?
It's a very interesting landscape we're having now, because those who have jumped on the digital payment bandwagon earlier are now having challenges because we now need to upgrade our entire customer journey, right? Because there wasn't a problem then, because the people who were using the digital payment journeys were people who were tech savvy anyway, right? And today we need to cater for general public. So there is now a need to upgrade the experience. And people who have not been on it, while jumping on experience, may not have the know-how or may not be addressing the correct customer pain points. So we're kind of 50-50 at the moment. Everybody is still trying to catch, be there. People who knows the problem are having trouble with the solution, and people who knows the solution doesn't know how to get there.
Okay, and then I really like what you said. It's about customer experience, because as we have done, many of those studies as well with our clients, more and more so, the consumers of today are really looking at experiences, and therefore understanding, the journey that it takes and what are the steps that we can influence is a fantastic way of looking at it. Bryan and Kurt, what about you? What's your point of view?
Well, I definitely agree with Matthew, the customer experience, and let's also not forget that the customer is changing. If you want to expand the customer pool, like Matthew said, it's no longer the super nerdy techie that knows how to know his way around the most complicated process, but really the ordinary man in the street kind of scenario. I think I have two other pain points that I think would be useful. One is, I think in terms of transaction fees, with technology, transaction fees should come down because the service is automated. You have aggregated, you have bulk purchasing, and we should see those fees coming down. And I think the more successful sites are those that overcome that, especially those that do person-to-person payments, transfers across borders. It's not a secret that a lot of Southeast Asian countries, Philippines, Indonesia, are the recipients of some of the biggest channels of person-to-person payments. And that's for good reason, because they have a lot of manpower that gets exported, and they send money back on a regular basis to support their families. And so bringing down those fees would also be a huge attraction. And, again, some of those companies are doing really well. So that's one. The second thing is, I think the companies are also thinking about how do we expand the kind of services that we have in digital payments. So we're not just looking at getting more of the regular payments and converting them to digital, but can we use that to expand the market, so to speak? And I think one good example, we're seeing some of this already in the Southeast Asian markets, would be the buy now, pay later services. And essentially what they do is they said, well, look, digital payments have now made it easier to make those payments. But you still have a class of products. So typically, higher purchase goods were only for big ticket items, things like furniture, big electronics, right? And it involved a huge application process, forms to be filled out, stuff like that. But if we can make that a digital process, and we can bring that cost down, we can actually bring it down to smaller ticket items. So things like maybe a cheap handphone, maybe $100, but split into 5 payments of $20 each, maybe a bit more manageable to encourage that particular class of people who would not have access to that service or that credit facility to now be able to afford that level of purchases. And I think the buy now, pay laters are now making some headway in that particular market. They are opening a higher purchase market where none existed previously. And again, that's using digital to kind of overcome that. Now, that has got its own issues, I do admit. But again, with that innovation, it takes away that one particular pain point for that level of goods.
Right. Very interesting point of view, Bryan. Kurt, do you have any sort of views on this in terms of innovation front?
Listen, I'll probably echo the same sorts of themes in terms of customer convenience and also the establishment of marketplaces. I think that we've definitely seen that in transport, where ultimately what some of the innovation and the products that we've been piloting recently, such as our Opal digital card, which is it's a prepaid debit card that's effectively linked to a customer's Opal account, and it's able to be pushed into a customer's wallet, and they're able to use that to pay for public and private transport as well. And so what we're using is, I guess, digital payments and digital wallet payments as a more or less a universal ticket now that customers can use to purchase a myriad of different services. And then we're using those proprietary EMV protocols and rails to then aggregate all of those transactions to then be able to understand what a customer's end-to-end customer journey is. And what we can then do is then use that data in a opt-in way from a customer's perspective, but use it in a smart way to then be able to incentivize and nudge certain customer behavior. So for us, from a transport perspective, we really want to encourage customers, for instance, to leave their car at home and adopt multiple modes of transport to get from point A to point B in order to manage congestion. So what we can do is, if a customer uses digital payment across multiple transactions, that might span public and private transport, we can then reward customers for that sort of behaviour. So it's a customer convenience benefit, but it's also it opens the world up to be able to use data in a really efficient, effective way, and then for you to then be able to use other incentives, I think, on top of that. So that's really what we're trying to embrace, and we've seen customers really gravitate towards it and respond really positively.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic in terms of how you guys have used what everybody known as big data or analytics to really help with innovation, and I think that itself it's already a one step ahead in terms of that. I think, well, putting on my consumer hat a little bit, so I think what we have seen is also there are more and more digital payment brands, if I call them, that's coming up and popping up, right? So from various different companies or brands, I guess they want to be part of this action. So what's your point of view in terms of, should that sort of relatively be controlled and limited to, a handful, or should that, sort of be a free space where everybody and anybody can come in and offer some form of digital payment brand? I mean, if you look at, for example, China, it's pretty much down to the 2 or 3 at most, right? Versus in some countries, you have like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 different kind of payment channels. What's your point of view on this in order, again, with the goal of, driving usage and adoption of digital payment in the long run?
So maybe I'll jump in. And I think, from a regulator's point of view, they would not want to limit the market. But I would also add that I think the market will then do the limitation. And again, for the nascent market, Singapore included, if you were to go into a hawker store where digital payments has been encouraged for some time, and they have a unified QR code, but they show you the number of digital payment providers that are signed up to that QR code, it could easily be 20 or 30 of them. And these are just the more major ones, but 20 or 30 for a market the size of Singapore does sound like a little bit too thick. As I said, there were almost 400 applicants for those licenses. I don't think all of them will remain in the same position for too long. And so you'll see a bit of consolidation happening. Again, it's a function of the market, and the market will call it.
Okay.
Well, I think options are always good. Being in a free market, competition will always encourage adoption and more innovative services, especially in countries with huge rural areas. I think this diversification will help with market penetration. What is important, however, is the seamless journey that the user needs to undertake to perform these payments. If these journeys can be simplified with things like a universal QR code or universal payment acceptance device, I think that will help a lot. And we'll let it be the consumer choice in terms of what brands or what products they want to use, so long as it doesn't change the overall payment journey and experience. I think it brings more good than bad.
Okay. I guess looking at time, I've got one last question before we open up for Q&A from the audience. So, I mean, we talked a lot about where we are now, where we are today, what's the adoption. So I guess if I were to ask, each of the panel to sort of imagine we fast forward 3 years later and we have the same conversation 3 years later. Where do you think, or where do you hope we would be in terms of our adoption of digital payment, and what would be, the biggest change that you hope to see in that context?
So I would like to see a seamless digital financial service experience. So while we've started seeing payment cards and e-wallets being interlinked with some having global acceptance like the various global players, I think we need to basically further integrate them as a total financial service solution. So that can be including savings, loans, spending, investments, or even like taxation. right? So with that, then of course this needs to be supported by faster and more developed infrastructure, and also to have better cost and efficiency value to the users. So that would be something interesting if it develops into that.
All right. Interesting. Kurt or Bryan, what's your sort of crystal ball in 3 years' time?
Yeah, I think I mean we've embarked on a bit of a journey in Australia around the adoption of certain protocols between the major financial institutions and banks in order to facilitate real-time payments, and so that hasn't been fully adopted and rolled out. And I think that will be a key one to attract customers to adopt digital payments. So I think the more real time we can make transactions in that fashion, and the richer the data that we can provide customers that relates to their financial transactions as well, the better the customer experience. So I'd like to see, particularly in Australia, I would like to see an increased adoption of that. I'd like to see more entrants in the marketplace. I think we've seen a number of fintechs that have been that have emerged and done some fantastic things, but we've certainly seen a number that have been sort of acquired as well by our major financial institutions, and I'd like to see a more competitive marketplace, and I'd like to see increased adoption of digital payments to drive down things such as transaction costs and the likes, in order to make it more accessible and attractive to more people.
All right.
Yeah, I think I agree with both views. I think some things in this world will change. So, for instance, 5 years ago, you could see on every street corner in town, there are people pushing credit cards, physical credit cards, right? Filling up application forms. I think that will change, or that has changed. That will not come back anymore, because one, that's a highly intrusive process, and lots of mis-selling allegations on that. And what that will mean is inevitably digital payments will be on the rise. There will be more. Success breeds success, right? So when they see that succeeding with the hawker next to you, and you're wondering how come he's got 10% more sales than before and I'm still at the same place, you will think about putting that in. And so that's one thing will happen. I certainly also see that these digital payments, that's really the start for them. They will evolve more financial services. Whether they become a neobank or not, I think that remains to be seen. But again, we've seen some of them already making the moves towards that, acquiring the licenses, acquiring existing banking infrastructure, acquiring the talent to try to do that. And I think that for the region in Southeast Asia is generally a good thing, because we do have a high percentage of unbanked. In some of the countries, more than 50% have no access to any basic banking services. And that's a huge market that should be addressed and can be addressed. With that comes along a whole host of other innovations, some of which we can see, but some we haven't even started thinking about. But that leads to a very interesting scenario. I also do see the regulators really getting up to speed in the region. So some of the regulators are really adopting some of the international practices, especially those coming over from the EU's payment directive, which is the second version. But some of the regional regulators haven't quite gotten up to speed. They will get up to speed, because these will potentially be bigger challenges to their existing banks. And they will need to figure a way out to regulate them for the interest of consumer protection. And I think all of that is generally positive for the region. There is quite a lot of runway in which things will develop and things will progress. And, I think it's an exciting time to be in digital payments.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think personally, as a consumer, again, if I put on my consumer hat, I'm really encouraged to see that even my favorite nasi lemak stores are now, doing e-payment. So, when I go out to run and then after that buy breakfast, I don't have to carry wallets with me anymore. So that, to me, is fantastic development. So we're going to Sorry, yes, Bryan.
I was just telling my wife, actually, I can't remember the last time I went to an ATM to withdraw cash.
True. But yeah.
And, that's where we are now, I think.
Cool. We're going to spend the next, I guess, 12, 15 minutes to answer some of the questions from the audience. So I guess if you do have questions, please post them and we'll sort of get through some of the questions as much as we can. I guess the first question that I'm going to post from the audience, it's coming from Sonia. So I think Sonia's question is, there are many who are resistant to digital payments due to the fear that their transaction will be traced or tracked by authorities. The privacy is compromised and so on. So what are your views on this matter?
Surprise, they're already being tracked when you transact on your credit card, right? But in real life, I think there has got to be a balance between the privacy you want to keep and the amount of digital transaction you want to make. And there are very good reasons why government or regulators want to track your transactions, right? For various security reasons. Hence, I don't think there's a way to get around it. I believe sometime in the future, maybe after my time, all payments are going to be digital, right? The use of cash is going to diminish, and ultimately it will be made redundant. So there's really no way of going around it, and being able to trace your payment, I think is a step up in terms of maintaining security, and of course, with all the money laundering going around and sorts like this, I think it's just a natural pathway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other feedback?
I think, like in everything, there is pros and cons. So being digital obviously makes tracking a lot easier. But instead of also just focusing on, I'm getting tracked, the question is that really that big a problem? And are there advantages out of that? Let me again give you an analogy. And so in Singapore, starting from this year, the government issues laptops and iPads to all students. Okay, and but these come with a software installed in there to monitor the usage of the students. So basically, to keep them out from unsavory websites. And there's also a tracker function. And what happened was one of these boys was a bit careless. He left his laptop in school, and by the time he came back, it was missing. Okay, and so what happens? They turn on the tracker, and guess what? They found the laptop operating from a certain location, and turns out it was the security guard of the school who had picked up the laptop, and he had brought it home. Okay, now that's not the only thing. So they could then see what was being done on the laptop, and the laptop was accessed from his home at night, used to purchase music. And so it was quite easy for the authorities to, number one, track the laptop, and two, come up with evidence that this security guard had misappropriated or stolen that laptop because he was using it for his own purposes. He wasn't taking it home for safekeeping and then bringing it back. And so that's kind of the unseen advantage of some of these tracking systems, that you can. It's easier to really get the bad guys and to also right the wrongs. So there are some advantages to that level of monitoring.
Right. I mean, there's always going to be pros and cons, right? So
yeah,
in that sense. So yeah. Great. Next question that I'm picking up is from let me see. This is coming from Shalini. So Shalini wants to know, ease of use could be the major motivational factors for consumers now. But as Gen Y, Z, and so on grew in totality, i.e. population, do you think functionality would outgrow ease of use? Hence, more digital products should be introduced. Any feedback to this?
I don't think they're contradictory in nature. I think we will always need more functions and more products. But the question is, should we underestimate the ease of use? And the answer is no. We should always encourage this ease of use to be seamless and easy across the different products that we introduce into the market. as more products are added, the more complex the customer journey tends to be. And if we relax in the area, it becomes a iteration in the adoption, right? So customers will always want it to be as easy as possible. If it's already 3 steps now, make it 2. If it's already 2 steps now, make it 1. And that's really the case because expectations increase, right? 10 years ago, the expectations was we have internet. Today, we want to watch movies in 4K. So that's really very different, right? So I don't think that's going to be changed, and more functions is definitely the way forward as well.
Okay. Any other sort of feedback to that? If not, I think I've seen a quite interesting question here, which again, I think all of you guys will probably have a view on this. So I know with the recent, hot topic on cryptocurrency. So the question here from Emily, it's, will we see cryptocurrency being recognized as a form of official payment in the near future? I guess official digital payment. What role do you see cryptocurrency will play in a cashless payment in future? Anybody will want to sort of have a crack at this?
Yeah, listen, I think from my perspective, and it's only a perspective, is that I think cryptocurrency will become more synonymous and more widely adopted over time. Obviously, at the moment, it is used by early adopters, and it's subject to significant volatility, and because of that, it's there's been certain regulations that to be applied to it. But I think the more that people become familiar with it, and it becomes a method of payment for certain products and services, and once the volatility, I think, associated with it sort of stabilizes based on a number of different factors, I think it will become more broadly adopted. Is my sense.
Yeah, I think the term of cryptocurrency being official implies that it becomes an officially recognized form of payment under law, and currently I don't think any of them have achieved that kind of official recognition. But that's not to say we'll never get there, because we know that the central banks are working on their own cryptocurrencies. And if they do get that in place, then you will see the cryptocurrency really having that stamp of approval, that backing of law, if that's done. And that would be really interesting, because it would then mean that cryptocurrency is no longer specialized or techies only good, but it transcends to everywhere. And digital payments might be kind of the precursor to that, because with digital payments, you are really not seeing the currency behind that. And cryptocurrency really just works in the back end to effective that transfer of value from one party to another party, right? And so cryptocurrency will then just play that background role to that, and that could well be the future.
All right. I guess we have time for maybe one or two last question. Something from Ruben. So mobile payment still poses security threats, as we're not sure how safe from cybersecurity threat through our individual mobile phones. What's your, I guess, feedback, or what can be done in order to assure people in terms of this concern?
My sense is it's more about how we prevent and respond. I don't think we can fully eliminate it. The analogy is pretty much, I'm afraid of getting hit by a car, therefore I don't cross the road, right? So, and that's really the case. There will always be cybersecurity incidents, and they are very real in nature. We can only do our best in preventing it, but in real life, there's no surety there, right? So it's also about how we respond to it, and when we say security, we need to look at it from a more holistic sense of it. What exactly are we so afraid about? Are we afraid of losing our money specifically, or are we afraid of some other things in terms of privacy, right? So I think a lot of players or even regulators give assurance that if money is lost in cybersecurity incident, we always give a benefit of doubt to the user, right? When the money will be refunded, right? So in that sense, I think it has to give some form of surety that if you lose 50 ringgit or 100 ringgit in a transaction, you're likely going to get it back, regardless of the cost of the incident. And that's really important advocacy that we should make. And I don't believe any system is 100% foolproof. If anyone tells you that, well, not my place, but I personally wouldn't want to make the kind of assurance, right? As much as preventive actions we can take, the fact is there's only so much we can do. And there is always a bigger threat out there.
Yeah, and I think the question is probably more about coming from, if my money disappear or if there's something wrong, and what you said, Matthew, if we have assurance that if I can get my money back easily, if it's fraud or if it's that kind of stuff, then I think it's relating more of that rather than privacy.
Yeah, I just actually want to jump in with a slightly different point of view, and these are my observations. Currently, in terms of mobile security, I think Kurt talked about it. A lot of the phone systems, so the iOS and the Android systems, now come with their on-device security systems. And these are big companies who constantly think about security. They have huge teams working on that security. So, it's a lot better than individual small companies or putting that down to the individual level to be in charge of that level of security, the device level security. But also remember that cybersecurity is also a weakest link kind of game. And what is the weakest link in that chain? And I think current evidence really points the finger at the user. The user is the weakest link because he unwittingly clicks on something that he shouldn't have clicked on, or worse still, nothing to do with the phone security, but a phishing scam, right? A call coming in, somebody saying, "Oh, look, I'm from the security department, and you need to key in this number now," and that has really been the greatest phishing ground, okay, for scammers recently, and more money is being lost through that. Individuals are losing not just $50 or $100; they're losing thousands of dollars. In some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars through that. And what it also tells us that in this weakest link analysis, the users also need to upgrade their digital awareness because they're now on a digital platform, right? All the hardware, the software systems are getting those digital upgrades to adopt a cybersecurity stance. But the user also needs to upgrade his stance because he's now on a new platform. He cannot operate as if, this is the offline world. The only scammers will appear in front of me in the door. No, that has changed. So we also need to work on that particular part of cybersecurity, the individual level.
All right. Thank you so much, Bryan. Kurt, any last word before we close?
Listen, I don't think so. I think from a as it relates to security, I tend to agree. I think that a lot of the vulnerabilities relate to the weakest link, so to speak, and the beauty of digital wallet payments is that at the moment it's there's probably three or four main operating systems that afford it that basically service the majority of customers, and there's significant money that goes into ensuring the security of those environments. So it's I think that and that will only continue to improve over time. So I think that's it's something that stands digital payments in good stead.
All right, great. So I think we are just about time in terms of the discussion this morning. It's a fantastic sort of conversation with Kurt, with Matthew, and with Bryan. So again, I guess a big thank you to all of you for spending your time with us this morning. And we really hope that, as as a region and as a country, I think e-wallet and digital payment is something that we will continue to sort of see the growth, and if each of us will definitely be continuing this journey. So thank you very much, everyone.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.